Hi, my name's Catherine from Crime Psych, and in this video I'm going to be doing a book review. I was asked to do this book review by somebody who'd contacted me online, and I was a little bit skeptical at first. However, once I read it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I want to share with you The New Evil. This is a really fascinating read. They did send me the PDF copy online, and I liked it so much, and I knew so many people who would enjoy this book that I did then go out and purchase it. And when I was first asked to review this book, I was a little bit skeptical about it, and that's mainly because of the term evil. I thought of it as quite problematic. The word evil is very subjective, and the definition of it can depend on the context, on societal values, on moral values, and so on. For me, the word evil has religious connotations, and so for this book to claim it had produced a classification system to define how evil a particular act is was a little bit odd, or so I thought anyway. I even said to the author that I found the idea of evil interesting, that he thought he could define it. This is the word that a lot of us use, but it makes no sense when it's used alongside psychiatric conditions. But Dr. Brucato was confident about his work, and he asked me if I'd just read it anyway. And despite being skeptical, I read it, and it was immediately proved wrong within the first 3 pages. Shut me up, proved me wrong. As a researcher, I am always open to constructive criticism, and I'm willing to change my views. My views aren't set at all. But from the very onset, the authors of this book brilliantly define what they mean when they talk about evil. There are several pages outlining what they mean when they talk about evil, and they do make that very clear. They're also very careful to outline what they don't mean as evil, how they don't define evil. The authors focus on the acts that some people have committed rather than the person themselves. And as I've come to realise myself, offenders can have loving and caring relationships and can operate really well in some areas of their lives. I once had a lengthy conversation with a gentleman about human rights, and we had very similar views on it. But he was a convicted murderer. After that, I found out that he did have a very violent past, which resulted in him killing this other person. Unlike similar books I've read, the authors do acknowledge the depraved nature of the killings, rather than trying to sensationalise their acts to sell books. They pause and they do pay respect to their victims, which I found very respectful. The media often reports on violent offenders and gives background details of the offenders themselves, and very often little attention is given to the victim. Within criminal psychology, the type of victim can often tell us an awful lot about the offender. Now, in this book, you could substitute the word evil for violence, depraved acts, immoral behaviour, and the scale would still work in exactly the same way, and the book would be just as good. The Gradations of Evil scale contains 22 categories, which are on a continuum. Some acts of murder are not very evil and would be placed at number 1. Other acts of evil are described as being the worst kind of evil and would be placed in position number 22. Murderous acts, which are placed in categories 1 to 8, are those people who don't have any form of mental illness. They're not psychopaths. These murders are often committed for various reasons, such as abuse, impulsiveness, intensive feelings of jealousy or anger, in self-defense, or because of loyalty. And the authors give detailed examples of actual cases that could be described within the various classifications. Actions which are placed in categories 9 to 22 require the ability to distinguish between psychopathy, narcissism, psychosis, and sadism. Even with somebody with no prior knowledge, though, would be able to follow the authors as they lead the reader through these various categories. These acts would be committed to conceal evidence, for sport, for sexual gratification, and they'd be carried out without any compassion or without guilt. The new evil walks a very fine line between giving accurate, credible information that a professional could relate to, as well as being written well enough that a layperson would be able to read and enjoy the book as well. I've always thought of clinical psychologists being interested in the whole person. This book does just that. It gives detailed examples of the types of offender that each category has. However, applied psychologists, such as criminal psychologists like myself, are more interested in identifiable acts, measurable behaviours, which can be statistically tested in order to prove and define them. As I read the book, I found myself getting very excited about the possibility of being able to test out these categories. I have since asked Dr. Brucato if he would like me to do work with this, and he is quite interested in testing this scale. Besides the scale of evil, this book is an excellent resource for those who want to learn more about personality disorders and the difference between them, the differences between psychosis, psychopathy, sadism, and narcissism. The book also discusses cultural changes over time and how these can have an impact on behaviour. It also gives some thought as to why rape, murder and other types of violent behaviour have increased over time. This book is not solely about the gradations of evil. It does give insightful discussions into the various subsets of murder, such as infanticide, women who kill, stalkers and school shooters. These chapters lead the reader through the various attributes and historical increase in their occurrence. As we know, there was a dramatic increase in violence and murder across America from the late 1960s. And this is the very reason that the FBI set up their behavioural profiling unit at Quantico. The book also discusses some of the possible causes for this behaviour. In conclusion then, I went from being fairly sceptical and looking at a book that says gradations of evil, I can categorise evil, to being really quite impressed with the authors. This book claimed to be able to characterise evil alongside psychiatric terms and personality traits, and I became completely enthralled within the book. The book is very well written. It's almost as though they knew what the reader would be thinking before they even got there, and they gave an insightful opening chapter. It was really interesting, it was engaging, it was detailed, and it was quite simply brilliant. I'm looking forward to exploring and testing the gradations of evil on a statistical scale. So if you do get a chance to go out and buy this book, do it. It's absolutely brilliant and it's a really good read. It does give some, in the first part of the book, it gives some very detailed descriptions of some of the more infamous murders that have been committed, and some of the details in the book, especially of the more evil, as the authors define it, murders. And so some of the details can be a little bit upsetting. However, once you get through that and you begin to understand and look at the various psychiatric diagnosis and the various classifications that they can fit in, it is definitely worth a read. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you do enjoy the book if you read it. Bye for now.